Good evening from our headquarters in Kiev. This is the Sunday show at Hromadske International, the only prime-time English-speaking program explaining Eastern European geopolitical storm, and I'm Natalia Humenyuk. Today we can speak about 5 years of the detention of the famous Ukrainian filmmaker Oleg Sentsov, who is now already for 5 years in Russian prison. There was a lot of talks about Oleg last year when he was for 145 days on the hunger strike, but he is still there. What is important to mention that Oleg is charged with terrorism, but the whole case is fabricated. We can go into the details about that, but there are little doubts about that. But with this story, we would like also to draw to attention that it's not just the one case. Of course, we heard about many names, many numbers, but at this stage we can speak about at least 100 Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, citizens of Ukraine, who are detained in annexed Crimea and in Russia. These figures can be sometimes like 2 people more, 2 people less, but in generally we have at least 56 people who are charged with extremism and or terrorism because of their religious beliefs. They are Muslims. Up to 20 people are political prisoners, including them there is Oleg Sentsov and Alexander Kolchenko and many more. And there were also 24 sailors captured near the Kerch Strait last year, so they are still in custody, but in Moscow. And those figures, they exclude those people who are detained in the occupied Donbas. So speaking about the incredible mass-scale repressions against the people, and there is little, it feels sometimes that there is little we can do about that. And I would like to introduce here Sasha Romantsova, who is Executive Director for Center for Civil Liberties, and Maxim Butkevich, Coordinator of the No Borders Refugee Organization and the Solidarity Committee, who are doing really a lot as a human rights defenders. So maybe starting with Oleg case and not just his case, we'll have a lot in our program. We'll have interviews with the people. We have interview with the mothers of the political prisoners. What would you say? What we can do at this stage, because it's just lasting too long and it feels like there is very limited things the international organizations and like human rights defenders may do.
Okay, we have now two levels where we can influence this case at all. Case for whole Crimean prisoners here in Ukraine, one partly, and partly in international stage. International stage, first of all, it's pressure from Russia Federation, because we know there are a lot of kinds of sanction was creating against Russia in different organizations, but one of them is Council of Europe, and 16th and 17th of May here in Helsinki we will have a committee of Ministers of Council of Europe, and there we'll start a dialogue with Russia Federation about one of the kind of sanction about them. Again, that sanctions, they don't have a voice in PASE. It's political Parliament Assembly of Council of Europe. So a lot of friends of Russia Federation trying to back that voice. So we understood that maybe we don't have enough power to stop this process, but we can put the first step for this dialogue. It's that Russian Federation need to release all Crimea prisoners, and it's 24 sailors and near the 100 case of political prisoners, and more than 100 people who are illegal prisoners in territory of occupied Donbas. So now one of idea it's online action about pressure to the ministers of foreign affairs of these countries, who is a member of the Council of Europe, and it's going now. So join, please, all our friends, please do that together with us, and we do some action in the street with Ukrainian Academy of Leadership. One of them was on the Friday. So we're trying to do that with, and first of all, it's kind of pressure in the international level, because this question needs to be first in the possible dialogue between whole members of Council of Europe and Russia Federation. And second level, how I told, it's one of what really can Ukraine do without anybody. It's without any competition with the Russia Federation. It's give the possibility to relatives have a supporting here inside the Ukraine, because even we have a budget for that, but still we don't have enough functional how relatives can get this money. So it's one of the ways how we can support them, because all these people, I mean political prisoners in the territory of Russia Federation and Crimea, first they're scaring, it's about their relatives. So we can support them, give this feeling, the security for their relatives.
You know, Maxim, do you have any hope that, for instance, some negotiation with Russia can move forward at this stage? There were, for instance, when Oleg was on the hunger strike. But after that, we were waiting. Maybe a president would change, maybe something, but it doesn't look so.
Well, this question is more difficult than it seems. I would not dare to say that I have this hope, but of course I cannot say that there is no hope. We hoped for the happy end of the story for all these 5 years. There were high hopes in 2014. Then in 2015, after the military court sentenced actually Oleg and Alexander Kolchenko, another Crimean hostage, to these incredible prison terms.
I should remind, it's about 20 years to Oleg Sentsov and 10 years to Alexander Kolchenko.
And just to be mentioned, it is important that this is 20 and 10 years of strict penal colony, which is much more difficult to live in than the usual penal colony. So 20 years, it seems to be almost an indefinite term. Of course, we hoped all these years, and we tried to stimulate both Ukrainian authorities and international partners at different levels to push Kremlin to negotiate the release in practical terms. And yes, last year the hopes were high during the hunger strike, but it seems to be that for certain people in Kremlin, primarily I think it's about Vladimir Putin, this is some sort of a weird matter of principle. Not to negotiate on that, and still, this is why we call them hostages. We believe and we see that Russian Federation's logic is to exchange them for something. So we basically should find this something we can negotiate about. And another thing which is obvious after all these 5 years, there will be no release of Ukrainian prisoners in Russia without international solidarity at very different levels, starting with international organizations and platforms and foreign governments, and ending with grassroots solidarity campaigns. I'm afraid that Ukrainian society, Ukrainian community, and Ukrainian authorities are not able at the moment on their own to achieve the release of our compatriots. But together internationally, I still hope we can put enough pressure upon Kremlin to get their release.
I would suggest we also watch the interview. I've managed to talk to the mother of Oleg Sentsov, Lyudmila Sentsova. She's in the annexed Crimea. She's over 65, not feeling very well, but extremely strong, powerful woman. She's bringing up two kids of Oleg Sentsov. The elder is 16 and the younger, 13. Vlad is sick with autism. He has autism, so it's really also personal tragedy for the family not to have Oleg with them, and that's what Lyudmila Georgievna had told us.
Most of all, he asks how my health is, how the kids are doing at school, and what they are interested in. Basically, we mostly talk about that. It's impossible to talk about his health, because everything is always, quote-unquote, fine for him. He plays sports, recovers, takes vitamins, looks after himself. We need not worry about him. Therefore, I might as well not ask him. Everything is always, quote-unquote, fine with his health. Regarding the children, he's interested in all the details, whether they are not sick, how the school is going, whom is Vlad seeing, how he is with friends. That's all. We get 20 minutes, but even that is not enough.
How often do you communicate?
Once a month, for 20 minutes.
And what will Alina do? She's 17, almost an adult.
16 and a half to be exact, yes. You know, she has not yet decided. At first she wanted to do photography, but now she seems to have abandoned the camera. She wanted to be a camera woman, like her dad, to spend time with him.
What is Alina planning to do in the future? Because she's already finishing school.
I would like her to get an education. And she wants that too, but definitely not in Russia, she said. But where?
What has changed for you during the hunger strike? You were probably relieved after he ended it, but did you understand his motive?
I was very afraid. I knew the state of his health, how he endured a lot of diseases when he was little. Even if he wanted to, he really did not. They would not take him into the army for health reasons. He was on prescription medicine because of his heart failure, because of his polyarthritis. Then, on top of that, his hunger strike. Of course, I was terribly scared. He tried to calm me down, saying, "Mom, my body will manage, everything will get better." But it was torture. Every day, I went to bed thinking about it, and then getting up again, waking up even at night and thinking of him immediately. I really wanted him to stop starving, to stop the hunger strike. Lord heard me.
How did you find out? Did he call?
I was told by Alina first. She called me. She was in Simferopol, called me and said that Dad ended the hunger strike. I could not believe what I heard. She said, "Grandma, I'm telling you the truth." And then Father Clement called. He said our prayers have worked and Oleg has stopped the hunger strike. But the hardest stage of coming out was still ahead. I don't know. I guess he did the right thing.
At the time you said that you understood why he did that, or accepted it.
I did not understand it. I merely accepted the fact. I accepted his decision. I could not understand it at all. How he could put himself under such risk. Of course it was hard for me, but I accepted it.
During the hunger strike, who has contacted you? Russian politicians? Ukrainian ones?
No one. Practically no one. Recently, some of our human rights defenders. Then there was this one Crimean Tatar human rights activist. Father Clement also came once.
Then you wrote that letter?
Что за письмо, что там было и что после этого изменилось у вас в отношении?
I wrote a letter. I already said that I was going to when I found out there was a possibility to do that. Maybe some mercy will be shown because of how long he has been held there. So I wrote to Putin himself. You know, I thought he's an Orthodox Christian. He just returned from holy places. I was hoping for mercy, hoping he would respond with something. And then I received an official answer. Not just one, but two answers came. And there it was clearly written that he himself has to write to the President of Russia to ask for pardon. Only then a question of pardon will be considered. And that was it. I realized that my letter to Putin was in vain. I shouldn't have written anything at all, although I knew that it was probably a wrong move. But what if? And you know, there was some kind of hope. And what if someone else supported me? What if this plea became the last straw? But no. Now I know that it was never going to make things better.
It will soon be the 5th anniversary of Sentsov's arrest.
It was May the 10th, 2014. He was arrested on that day. Officially, they announced the arrest on May 11th, but he was taken on the 10th. On May the 9th, he was there with the children. He was on a trip to Bakhchisarai with Vlad and Alina. Then they went to baths and Vlad stayed with me. Alina said that she will go with Dad, and they went to Simferopol. Then at 2 in the morning, Alina was brought back to me, which meant that Oleg was already arrested.
Considering he was given 20 years, do you think there is hope for amnesty? Under which circumstances could he be released earlier?
I just hope that maybe something will change within the government. the policy will change. After all, it is not just Ukrainians who are asking for Oleg to be released. Russians are too. There is general understanding that this case was mostly fabricated. I don't know what to hope for. I hope, for one, that the people do not forget. I was terribly afraid that a year passes and then everyone will forget. And how can he stand it? And many thanks to everyone who does not forget. He was very worried. He did not even want any photos to surface. When I said that I will be coming, but I only went to Rostov for him, I said I would come, but he said, "Mom, it's not necessary. Neither of us will benefit from this." I told Alina that they can take her straight there, even with an attendant. They told me that we just need to take an attendant, fly there, and see Oleg right away. She cried her eyes out. She said, "Granny, I would hug my dad and I would have to fly back without him. How do you think I will live after that? You see?"
А потом ты думаешь, а как жить буду? Вот понимаете? Да самое главное, да, что вот люди, если бы не люди,
People really do help. If it were not for the people, everything would have petered out by now. Many thanks to the public.
может быть, а это спасибо людям.
Some things happen when you least expect them.
Да, как мне тоже говорили.
Yes, I've heard that too. Even Oleg wrote in one of the last letters, "Mom, I know that this will happen, but it will happen very
Мама,
unexpectedly."
я очень верю, что это случится, но понимаешь, это случится очень неожиданно. Почему-то он так написал.
You can read the full interview and watch it and share. That's what I would encourage you to do if you go to our webpage en.hromadske.ua in English and as well on our social media, Hromadske International, Twitter and Facebook, we are sharing these stories. As well, I would suggest that you also may share the documentary we've done about, which is named From Crimea to Siberia, How Russia is Tormenting Political Prisoners Sentsov and Kolchenko. It's also available in English, so you can tell the story to other people. Coming back, why would you probably say also why this case is so significant?
The case of so-called Sentsov group, and primarily Oleg Sentsov, was and still is regarded as not only one of the repression cases, but the case with a capital C. It was the first fabricated case on terrorism charges in occupied Crimea. So basically, Russian Federal Security Service came after Oleg Sentsov and Alexander Kolchenko and two other persons very soon after Crimea was occupied. And they were made an exemplary case. Russian authorities did all in their power to show what will happen to those who show their discontent with occupation. Basically, this whole trial and the whole case and these very extensive prison terms, they are a threat to any dissent in occupied Crimea. And at the same time, it was very instrumental in creating the climate of fear. Look, they said to the population of occupied Crimea, what we are saving you from. We are saving you from these terrible Ukrainian terrorists who want to blow up your beautiful peninsula. And this is why nowadays it's our beautiful peninsula.
We also have with us on the Skype Askolt Kurov, who is the Russian filmmaker who produced the documentary trial about the trial against Oleg Sentsov, and he maintains the contact with Oleg. He had seen him a few months earlier, and as well is helping Oleg to direct the movie, which is filmed according after the Oleg's scenario. Askolt, thanks a lot for joining. Just let us know what was your latest contact with Oleg, how he is, what he's doing. He's working on the movie, as I know. So what you can tell about him at this stage?
Hello. Well, I met Oleg on March the 1st in the prison in Labetnangi. You know, this is one of the northest prisons in Russia. It's almost North Pole. so the climate is very tough. But Oleg is doing well, if it's possible to say. He recovered almost fully after his hunger strike, and he goes on with working on his new film scripts. He works a lot. He's doing some sports, and he's in touch with his film crew. You know, he managed to direct his film from the prison. It's like experiment because he only was able to direct the emails or via his lawyer to approve all the storyboards, casting, and so on. So he's good.
Ascolt, there was a lot of attention, international and also in Russia, when Oleg was on the hunger strike. Unfortunately, everything is good with his health and he's not any longer. But we are concerned about this international attention and the attention inside of Russia. You're talking to a lot of filmmakers, you're presenting Oleg case. What still could be made at this stage internationally and maybe inside of Russia?
Yes, you know, regarding the international attention, I can say that right now I'm in Belgrade in Serbia at the Documentary Film Festival, and today we have a screening of the trial, The State of Russia versus Oleg Sentsov documentary, and tomorrow we'll have a discussion, panel discussion about this documentary and about the trial by Sergei Loznitsa, which tells about one of the first Stalin's show trials. So international community, filmmakers, they try to keep the focus on this problem. But regarding Russia, also 2 days ago it was sad anniversary of 5 years Oleg was arrested, and there were some protests in Russia. People just started to protest Sunday around Kremlin, and we have some materials published about this. But unfortunately, of course, it's very difficult to keep the attention for such a long period on this case, and we have to invent some new reasons, some new events to go on with our fight for Oleg Sentsov.
And maybe you would say also then inside of Russia, still you said like there were some one-person protest, but last year there was a lot of appeals from the Russian cultural community, literature community. Is it still there? How big is still this case in Russia now, and are any discussion that that at least in Russia attention is there?
Unfortunately, it's being discussed much less than last year, because last year Oleg's hunger strike gave all the cultural community, not only in Russia but all around the world, a very, very strong impulse to go on with the hardest protest ever. But such cases are being forgotten very fast, because there are so many events every day, and I cannot say Oleg is forgotten, but it's not as intense as we had, for example, last year.
Together with Oleg, there was another person detained, Alexander Kolchenko, maybe less popular, less known, but that's also important, because a lot of names are not that much known. Alexander Kolchenko is an activist and anarchist who is in the prison near Chelyabinsk. He is charged with sentence for 10 years. But this year, like just a probably a bit of like a month ago, my colleague had managed to make a written interview with Alexander Kolchenko, and I probably would like to read out some of what Alexander had answered to Hromadske. So that's what he is saying. I would like to say to Ukrainian and Russian political prisoners that the question of our release could drag on for years, perhaps even until the time when Putler is overthrown. It's possible that a few of us will have to sit out our entire sentence, but everything that happened and is happening is not in vain. The struggle continues on the other side of the prison fence, and this very moment a new world is being built, a world where we'll be neither master nor slave nor any prisoners. We need to be prepared to join the ranks of these builders of the free world. We have to use our time in prison to the maximum benefit. In general, we try to live a fuller and brighter life in spite of our enemies. And for Ukrainians, greeting from the Ukrainian poet Taras Shevchenko: if you fight, you will win. That was from a Kolchenko letter to Hromadske, and it's also available on our platforms. And if you're following us on Twitter, you can also find this story and share it because it's pretty unique. So what also we have to know about Alexander today?
Now we know that during this time for holidays in Russia Federation, they put them in peninsula isolator, and we asking if that was our contact with one of the Russian human rights defenders. Ask them, do you have a contact them, and what has happened? Why accusation about that? Why it's like just a reason why they put them there? And they told that it's a pity, but it's just a tradition. Just the people with such accusation like terrorism during such long holidays like this Easter and 1st May holidays, they put them in this like special, more security places in the trail. So in the prison. So it's we don't have like formal reason why they do that, but they do that every time when like they need to have a holiday. So it's one of the, I think it's one of the way how to push and how do bad condition even in such small things in jail for people with such accusation.
I myself am in touch with Alexander. We exchange letters to an extent possible, of course, because not all letters actually reach him or me, but we keep in touch. And when once I asked him after another penalty being imposed upon him in this penal colony, what was the formal pretext, he had this smiley and written that there is always pretext. The rules, internal rules of the penal colony are shaped in a way that at any given moment the administration can put any prisoner in isolator for whatever invented reason. And with Alexander it happens usually once in 3-4 months at least. At the same time, he really tries to keep up his self-education. He's a very self-educated person. He reads a lot. And we exchange quite a lot of thoughts and information about, for instance, non-violent education. He is very interested in that. He's very interested in environmental issues. And I would say that both Alexander Kolchenko and Oleg Sentsov are very inconvenient Ukrainian prisoners, both for Russian authorities and for some of their allies abroad. They are not Ukrainian-speaking persons. Oleg is ethnic Russian, and they are not right-wing or self-proclaimed nationalists. Oleg never defined his political platform, but from his speeches and his writings we see that he values rights and liberties. And Alexander is an anarchist and anti-fascist. This is why when he was charged with belonging to the far right-wing organization, it wasn't even laughable. He was an active militant anti-fascist. So they do not fit into this constructed image of Ukrainian far-right enemy. Russian authorities came to liberate Crimean population from. And this is why they're so inconvenient for Russian authorities.
Another, let's say, extremely inconvenient case is the case of 24 Ukrainian sailors who are effectively war prisoners, but charged and tried in Russia in the breach of Geneva Convention. And we have with us Ilya Novikov, who is a lawyer to captured sailor Roman Makryak. There are various lawyers for all 24. Ilya Novikov had been a lawyer for another Ukrainian political prisoners. I guess he is with us online. So, Ilya, thanks a lot for being with us. Maybe let us again and our audience, make our audience informed on what's happening with the case of the Ukrainian sailors. There were some hopes that maybe after the Ukrainian elections there would be either some exchange or something. And also what's happening with the trial, which is from the very beginning is illegal, but still what you're trying to do.
Well, there are rumors, a lot of rumors that after Ukrainian presidential election, after the new president-elect Vladimir Zelensky will take his office, something can change in this case. Right now, we have precisely the same situation which we have from the very beginning. All 24 Ukrainian seamen are in Lefortovo detention center, arrested. Their term of arrest was prolonged 2 times by now. And the rumors are that by the end of summer, probably the preliminary investigation in this case has to come to the end. And the trial itself can start probably in October or November this year. It's unclear if all these people will be put on trial, all the defendants will put on trial actually, because right now, all of them, they are indicted with illegally crossing the Russian state border as an organized group, but it's impossible to explain, nobody can explain it, even Russian authorities, why they indict the sailors on the same grounds as officers. It's quite obvious that a sailor cannot make a decision where the ship is going. There's no way for a sailor to prevent his warship to cross illegally or other way any border in the sea. The second question still unclear is if this trial will take place in Crimea, because from legal point of view, Crimean Peninsula is a black hole. Is a disputed territory from the point of view of international law. This is Ukrainian territory, and no foreign diplomat, no journalists, but a few who can take a risk and enter Crimean Peninsula without official permission from Ukrainian authorities, without following special procedure for foreigners to enter this territory, would attend the trial. If the trial will actually take place in Crimea, we probably will face much more difficult, much more hard working conditions that in any court on Russian territory.
And Ilya, there were news earlier about the poor health conditions and not a proper access of the medicine for some of the sailors, as well on the pressure of the Russian security service people towards some of the sailors. What we know at this stage, is it still there, and what can be done against that?
Well, it's standard situation for any criminal proceeding when an ill or injured person is involved. When Ukrainian authorities insist that these 3 wounded seamen should be freed from jail, should have access to normal, high standard civilian medical assistance. The only answer they obtain from Russian authorities is that, we have excellent medical assistance in our jail system. Please be satisfied with it. There is absolutely no progress in this field. 2 days ago, on 10th of May, we had hearings in International Tribunal for Law of the Sea in Hamburg, Germany, where Ukraine filed a legal suit against the Russian Federation, insisting that the arrest and detention of Ukrainian seamen is contrary to international law of the sea. And it's quite interesting that this time Russian Federation answers in its written answer toward the court that the International Court of Law of the Sea has no jurisdiction over this case because the arrest of Ukrainian seamen was a result of military activities. It's quite a good point, but we see that within the last 6 months, starting from the very first day, from 25th of November last year, Russian authorities insist that it was merely a civil action. It was a police action. It was a law enforcement action, this arrest. And from legal point of view, from my point of view, it's quite an interesting, it's quite an important detail of this case. What would be the final position of Russian government? Because you cannot hold both positions, that it was a law enforcement action, it was military action. You have to choose one, or you have to others choose in your stead.
And maybe, Ilya, give us a final... We're generally talking about the situation with the Ukrainian political prisoners. You've been the lawyer for Nadia Savchenko, a Ukrainian war prisoner who was exchanged for the Russian military. And in many cases, we are following the trials. We're looking at the procedures. You're all great, incredible professional lawyers. But we understand that is it really the only thing which is needed is a political will to free these people, like Sentsov, like the others?
Yes, it's quite clear that no legal measures, no legal steps can be effective in these cases where when the case becomes political in Russian courts, the defense has zero chances. And in other cases, we have very little chances to get our clients acquitted, but it's how the system works. I must reiterate that while the decision to pardon and to release Nadia Savchenko was of political nature and was motivated by political motives, it's still important to do all your homework. I'm speaking about lawyers who are handling every separate case. It's very important to do your job, to provide politicians who will make their efforts to persuade the Russian authorities to release a client with information, with something to start with. So me and my colleagues were quite sure that while the final decision we're looking for will be made on political grounds, but it's still important to have a good legal case in every case.
Thank you, Ilya, for your work, first of all, and as well for letting us know more about the cases. You know, we are also discussing that there is always a chance for some prisoners exchange, but there is a dubious situation because, for instance, Ukraine is keeping some of the Russians fighting in the Ukrainian Donbass, and of course, neither Oleg Sentsov or many of those, Crimean Tatars, for instance, are not war prisoners. They are innocent civilians. So, how are we really looking at that? And as well, there is a call that that indeed there are some Russian citizens kept in Ukraine. So, how are you generally looking at this case of possible prisoner swap?
I think from the formal point of view, there is a very clear-cut distinction between people like Oleg Sentsov and Russian military personnel fighting in occupied territories of Ukraine, of course. But looking from the practical point of view, this demand, which is usually formulated as exchange all for all, probably is the only one which makes sense. Of course, it's also a risky thing, because we understand that upon exchanging Ukrainian hostages kept in Russia, there is always a chance to get more Ukrainian hostages, to arrest more people in occupied Crimea, to trade them for occupational forces personnel. But I'm afraid at the moment, currently, this is the only practical solution which is at the table, at least on the table, at least from Ukrainian side.
We will have activists calling to us from occupied Crimea, from Simferopol. That would be in some minutes during our program. Maybe before that, before getting to the case of particular Crimean Tatars, Sasha, would you point out a couple of maybe most notorious cases where people need help urgently?
Surely, we understood that Crimean Tatars it's a special target for Russian Federation because their society really organized and they're really close and support each other. So that's why we have like more 70s administrative accusation about the people who just come to the peaceful protest, just a simple peaceful protest. My people are not terrorists or something like this. So Russian Federation is scared about the organization of Crimean Tatars. So they trying to push them in their traditional ways. For example, they make a search each Thursday in the morning, early morning. That's why, for example, Crimean Tatarian women who is Muslim, so they sleeping in the clothes because for them it's really scared to be like showing their face or they like part of their bodies for men who they don't know or something like this. So it's people who living in this caring and try and support each other. And for now, for example, we have more than 160 children who stay without fathers, and in traditional families, just the father keeps the money and takes the money and brings it in family, or for example, build the house. So now whole other who is free, who trying to support such a family, whereas even like small babies, it's not just the children who go into school. It's surely we have different ages, but it's like just born babies in such families. And this last group 23 Crimean Tatarians. So it's like if we look at the tendency, it's like 10 times more than in the beginning 2014. It's really impressive. It's a way how Russian Federation authorities doing with eldest people. Like for example, we have this case of Kashka, whereas 4 people, it's old people, more than 50, and all of them have a different illness, and nobody of them have a medicine aid in the jail. And one of the biggest, more problematic in healthy care case, it's case of Adem Bekirov, who is invalid, and even in free at home, he has a problem to keep the healthy in the normal level, but in the jail it's one of the big problems. Each day he need more than 16 kinds of medicine, and even this medicine which family buy and trying to send them, not always jail accepted.
There are at least 56 Muslims, 55 of them are Crimean Tatars charged with either terrorism or extremism with no real reason. We also can kind of prove with all these cases. But what was striking that this March, there were 23 people detained in one of the biggest searches after 5 years. And what is also striking that in violation of the Article 76 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection for civilian persons in time of war, all detainees were transferred to the Rostov-on-Don, which is in Russia, where they are placed in separate remand centers. And we are having with us from Simferopol, from the annexed Crimea, Eldar Vaapov, who is an activist closer to Crimea Solidarity Movement. Eldar, so we're following the case of 24 Crimean Tatars who had been detained mainly in March and later in April. What's happening to them? What are the charges? What we expect because of this case?
Right now they are in Rostov-on-Don in Russia, and on 15th of May we are waiting for the court hearing, and we believe that in this hearing there will be a prolongation of their case, and they will stay there for 2 months more. Well, here in Crimea, if we talk about this last case, it was a strike towards the Crimean solidarity, and because many of the people who were imprisoned, they had an active way of life. 3 of them were the citizen journalists, and one of them was public defender. All of these people are accused in the case of Hizb ut-Tahrir, that the case of terrorist organization, and this is the blow for public for our public, and it is the blow for against the resistance toward this injustice that is happening in Crimea right now.
What are currently maybe the demands or appeal of the Crimean solidarity? Because we understand that though this case is huge, there were not that much of the international attention. So what still could be done? What is your appeal? And what are the Crimean solidarity movement people, members trying to do now?
Okay, right now we are trying to raise our voice around the world. We need to make people hear us, not only in Crimea but throughout the world, because this is the problem and this is injustice, and the only thing we can do is just to fight with them the ways that are not contradict their laws. And if we talk about our actions, they should be done in this way, okay? And we are not abandoning the help. We don't abandon the help because we think that, and we believe that finally, at the end, everything will be okay, and all these imprisoned people, so the sons of Crimean Tatars, will come back home soon.
And maybe you also explain for the people who know less. So the charges are the connection to the Hizb ut-Tahrir organization. This organization is forbidden, but most of the people, they have nothing to do with that. So maybe you would explain how the cases are fabricated, why we believe that the people who are charged and detained are innocent.
Well, this is a practice in Russia because it is very convenient to use cliches, and they just blame some organizations in terroristic actions, and after that they can use these cases just towards everyone who are not agree with their politics and who are not agree with their actions, and it is easy and easy way to do it right now.
Okay, so Neldar, thanks a lot for putting a bit more light on the case, and we would follow. Besides watching this interview, I would also like you to look at other stories we have in one of our special projects named Separated, where we met 9 members of the families of the Crimean Tatars who were detained and who tell their personal stories on what happened to them and their beloved. And for many people, they are already behind the bars for 3-4 years without even the court decision. What again is possible to do in this particular case, especially if we can speak about religious persecution?
Well, in the first place, whether it's about religious persecution on grounds of religious beliefs or political views, the most important but almost invisible work is to keep these people in the spotlight. The very moment political or religious prisoner is forgotten by the outside world, he or she is basically at mercy of his of administration of the prison, and he or she can be tortured or mistreated. And definitely the letter writing, very simple thing, is something that really keeps up the spirit of the prisoners. When it comes to persecution on religious grounds, It is interesting and extremely sad thing happening currently in Crimea, because basically the practices employed by Russian authorities in Crimea are those which were first perfected by the late dictator of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov, who persecuted unofficial Muslims trying to eliminate any possible dissent from the country. These practices were imported subsequently by Russian authorities to Russia proper, and now they're employed in full scale in occupied Crimea. So what I would say, these people definitely need solidarity, no matter if those who want to support political prisoners, if they are Muslims themselves or not, or no matter what they think of Muslim currents of Islam these people belong to. It is not a religious thing. It is a human thing, it is a political thing, and it is an issue of solidarity. Solidarity should be cross-sectional when it comes to views and beliefs.
I would just provide some names. A civilian journalist, Bekirov Remzi, a public defender, Izetov Reza, a volunteer activist, Suleimanov Ruslan, a volunteer, Umerov Shaban. This is not just the list. I'm providing you with the name of the people. There would be at least 5 trials in the separate courts in Rostov on March 13 and 14. This is a lot of work for journalists, for everybody who covering the story, because it's indeed there is an opportunity to come to the trial. There is an opportunity to tell the stories. There is an immense amount of materials. I should also would say that we are encouraging you to support, for instance, Hromadske, who is an independent media and doing its best to travel to those court hearings, both in Moscow, in Rostov, or going to Crimea. So you can also donate. You can find a donate button on the top right part of our webpage and on hromadske.ua for make these stories possible and for making them available in English. As well, I would say that, for instance, we have recently the documentary we brought from the Next Crimea, the price of life, the price of annexation is life, which is also there, which is also available in English and telling a lot of the stories. So the information is there. That's probably would be my call in this program, to say that there is an opportunity to cover this story broader. There are always new angles. So maybe Sasha and Maxim, what would you say? What would be your final, words for our international audience? How they may develop this story, that it just is not like another human rights topic, which is boring for everybody already, but remains probably one of the most important.
I just remind you about that in the page Safe Oleg Sentsov. Now we do the action, like pressure the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who will go into the Helsinki 16 and 17, and all of you can help us to push them and remind them that you can start dialogue with the Russian Federation only through this first question, is the releasing of political prisoners by the Russian Federation in Crimea and their own territory. And that's like first step. And second, surely we understood that all these cases is only because the Russian Federation thinks that all other world don't care about Ukraine, or have more biggest problem. So the Russian Federation try and create this big problem. So we all of us, we need to remember that if we don't start fight here, at the one moment Russian Federation with their scary ideas will come to your home. So be together, be solidarity, and be fight for all our political prisoners.
I would like to thank Hromadske actually for doing such a good work, keeping these people in the spotlight. As I mentioned before, this is extremely important. I would first call really to read and to watch and to listen about these people and spread the word. This is not about Ukraine and Russia. This is about much wider issues. By occupying Crimea, Russia effectively destroyed, however imperfect, but still a security system of post-World War II Europe. And Oleg Sentsov and his comrades are symbols of resistance to this occupation. So their cases are European cases and wider than that. So it's not about just Ukrainians and Russians quarreling about certain individuals. It is about much wider things. And also, Of course, people get tired. Those who support Ukrainian political prisoners, we can see that their fatigue is obvious, especially after the end of the last year's Oleg's hunger strike, when there were so many hopes for his release, and they did not materialize. We've seen this wave of solidarity dying out because people were disenchanted and tired. So I would just call to keep up good work, say no to despair, because if those who support political prisoners will fall into despair, what else hope do we have left for these people? Write letters to them, watch and spread stories, and put a pressure upon your governments and your officials and those who can at least a little bit influence the whole decision-making process in these cases.
So thanks a lot for your work. I would also appeal as a journalist who personally meet a lot of families like mothers, kids, brothers. Indeed, it's extremely important that the people are on the spotlight, and they are like sending this. It's hard for them always to talk, but still they're trying, despite it's so difficult for them again to remind themselves that you will care as well. So that was Hromadske International Sunday Show special edition devoted to the 5th anniversary of the arrest of probably most famous today globally political prisoner Oleg Sentsov, and the destiny of more than almost 100 Ukrainian citizens who were detained in the next Crimea and Russia due to their political position. And I'll tell you goodbye, and watch us on our platforms, Facebook and Twitter. Go to our webpage and.hromadske.ua. We are there 24/7. It's not just about the Ukrainian politics. Stay tuned and see you in a week.